Hello, everyone. Welcome to Reddit Talk, our CFB Talk 9. We're ready to take your calls. This is going to be one where we want to hear mostly from you. We are going to have an open schedule. We might be joined by William Castleberry, who covered the Potato Bowl for us. We also have JD Moore, who is currently at the Frisco Bowl. So we're a little bit on the lean side. But with that said, if you want to holler at us, raise your hand. We will be happy to let you up, and we'd love to hear from you. So thank you again for joining us on this Reddit Talk. So as we kind of settle in here, let's talk about what's been going on. So obviously Wyoming won the Potato Bowl. That's a huge deal because, first of all, Craig Bohl's team, everyone was sort of wondering how Craig Bohl, coming from North Dakota State, was going to do when he jumped to FBS with the Cowboys. Obviously, beating both WAC champion NIU earlier in the season and Kent State, the runner-up today, kind of gives them the superseding MAC title has been sort of what has been said. Also, right now, the Frisco Bowl is exciting. We've got UTSA with only one loss up against San Diego State with two losses. Unfortunately, the Aztecs don't particularly travel as well, but UTSA is in the house. Our own JD Moore has been sharing tweets of that audience, but also when he was walking around the parking lot before the game, he saw tons of UTSA fans and only one San Diego State fan. All right, Shane Yoders. Again, I don't know if that's your real name. I just added you. We'd love to hear from you. Why don't you go ahead and unmute yourself? Shane, I still can't hear you. You're going to have to unmute. All right. Well, we'll wait for Shane to figure that out. Again, if you'd like to come and join us and give us what you're thinking, please go ahead and unmute. Another thing I'll go ahead and talk about, and this is a thank you to those of you who follow us. We had our big holiday drive, the seventh time we've done it. Community members like you, people who listen, people who join us on Reddit and also on Twitter have donated over $13,000 it's going to be given to charity, which is just an amazing thing. Most of it's going to Toys for Tots, with three different children's hospitals that are also going to be recipients of the money that was raised. That's something we like to do every year. We've consistently been raising over 10 grand, which we give away immediately without taking any of it ourselves. It's something that we think is wonderful, and it's always really nice to see some of the other charity events that are being done by sports media around the country. Hey, Damp, I just got you up to the co-host. What's going on in your mind?
Well, not much. Well, again, hi everybody. We're doing it a little bit early today, but as always, it's wonderful to see you all on a lovely Tuesday evening. Well, first off, I want to echo what H honestly was saying, that we thank you all so much for everything that everyone donated for the holiday drive this year. 1,500-ish of which is going to a couple of bricks at universities. I'll have to look up which ones those are. I don't remember off the top of my head. But we also get the return of Raoul Claus, which is always something that I look forward to every single year, because that has become one of my favorite holiday traditions.
And hey, it looks like we have another hand up. Hey, Trey Cleghorn, just sent you an invite. Love to hear from you. As everyone connects in this wonderful internet of ours, I can see the classic Apple donut, even though it's not an Apple product. While we're going on there, a couple of other things. We saw the lower divisions crown their champions. Mary Hardin Baylor defeated reigning champ North Central in the D3 level, and Ferris State defeated Valdosta State in the D2 national championship. And Morningside in the NAIA defeated Grandview. That one was an interesting one because both of those teams were from Iowa. In fact, three of the four finalists in the NAIA were from that state. All right. Looks like we may have lost our speaker. So let's see if fourth time's a charm. Bird's eye view. Bird's eye view. We'd love to hear from you. In fact, I think you are unmuted.
Oh, are you talking to me? Sorry, my thing was connecting.
No worries.
Well, first off, I just want to say, thanks for having me. I'm a huge fan of the page. It's definitely great during college football season. Just wanted to give a shout out to my Buckeye fans out there. Obviously, the season, it's weird. We had that amazing receiving core. CJ Stroud put an amazing season up, and yet it's just a disappointing season. Obviously, it all comes back. Michigan, that happened, but that loss against Oregon came back to haunt us. And I still believe that this was like one of the best Ohio State teams in recent years. I'm just so upset that we won't get to see that offense. I'm loving the recruiting we're getting, but then of course, like Saban just counters with that transfer portal, so it feels like we get so close to Ohio State. I see our recruiting class, and then Bama gets just ridiculous guys in the transfer portal, or just also just a good recruiting class.
Well, I mean, the Buckeyes are going to the Rose Bowl. It's not, I wouldn't necessarily call it. I think a lot of fans, especially for example, your opponents coming up in the Rose Bowl, are thrilled that that's their option. I mean, this is Utah's first time to ever make that game. So I don't think the Bucks can necessarily completely call it a bad season there. I mean, before the BCS, before the CFP, that was the goal. That was always where all these folks wanted to be. But I mean, I also get it. I mean, after obviously, I think under the last 10 years, any year the Bucks aren't necessarily going for the national championship does seem, I suppose, a bit disappointing. I mean, if you're considering like you were Alabama up here, that's certainly the case. But it's interesting to say that. I know some of the people hearing that will be kind of like, well, it's hard to feel bad for an Ohio State fan when their fallback position is the Rose Bowl game. Which,
Oh yeah,
by the way, oh, go
trust me,
ahead.
I get plenty of heat from that. Like at least like with my high school buddies, like 'cause I went to Ohio State, they just like they all sub when Ohio State loses, and I just like I can't stand to hear from them.
Have you ever had a chance to go to the Rose Bowl yourself?
No, I haven't. So I just graduated from there in 2020. I haven't gone
Congrats.
to. Thank you. I haven't gone to any like playoff, or I never won the student raffle to go to the Big Ten championship game. But I've obviously gone to plenty of games in the shoe. I went to the opening game, or not the opening game, my freshman year, the game against Michigan, the double overtime game, which is still the best sporting event I've ever been to in my life. My junior year was the 63-point game, and then so I've gotten to see plenty of great games. Came back for Penn State this year. Still don't really, like I thought. I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of stupid that we stormed the field because we won as a 19-point favorite, but I don't care. Like, just felt good to be back and be able to storm the field after no fans there. So I definitely want to go to the Rose Bowl at some point. I was thinking about it, but if I'm ever gonna do it, it's probably gonna be more so when I'm an adult or I have people I'm gonna travel with.
Yeah, that makes some sense. And, I have to say, I've been to the shoe for a game myself, and it is one of the best places to see a football game. It is one of the real cathedrals, of college football. I heard that phrase years ago in a book, and it just stuck with me. And it really is. You walk in there. I remember my ears were ringing at halftime when it was kind of a break in all the crowd noise. That was a real exciting experience. I've also been to the Rose Bowl, which is obviously in many ways also another cathedral. I recommend it. There was a post on Reddit where people were sharing experiences. The way I did it, and if any of you out there ever get an opportunity to go to the Rose Bowl and you're kind of thinking, well, should I also take the Rose Parade? It's possible. The only thing I would caution is the Rose Parade, especially if you live even if you live on the West Coast. But if you live on the East Coast, you see it, it's in the morning, that's neat. But then you have to also remember if you're on the East Coast, it's 3 hours earlier on the West Coast. So your New Year's Eve isn't necessarily as exciting unless you plan to just stay up all night. And as someone on the West Coast, I never really realized as a kid I was watching the repeat of the Rose Parade because I wasn't waking up necessarily that early in the morning to watch it live. Um, but when I did it, I recommend it. You can usually reserve a spot in some of these bleachers they have. Otherwise, people will stay overnight on the parade route. It's a really neat parade. It's neat to see at least once. And then it's not that far if you're a healthy individual who can walk, maybe a mile or so, up and downhill. You can get over to the Rose Bowl right afterwards and head over to the tailgates and see all of that. And then after the game, meander your way back up. I did that in the 2004, so New Year's Day, 2004 Rose Bowl, and it's a memorable event. You got to see it at least once in your lifetime if you can, just to see it, even if it's not your team. If you can, and you're a hardcore college football fan, it is one of those bucket list games to see. But thanks so much for sharing that. We really appreciate it. And, good luck with the Rose Bowl for your Buckeyes.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Yeah, like a couple weeks ago, I was just bored and actually made a whole spreadsheet of stadiums and games I'd love to go to, and Rose Bowl is definitely on there. But really appreciate you guys letting me speak, and I'm gonna miss the college football season because this page is just great to just look at on a Saturday.
We appreciate that. Thanks. All right. So next, let's go ahead and check in with Reese Becker. Reese Becker, I went ahead and sent you an invite. Feel free when you get a chance, just unmute yourself, and there you are. We'd love to hear from you. Well, you're unmuted, but I can't hear you. Whenever you can, just go ahead and talk. I'll fill a little bit here as we go along here. I know sometimes we've had this problem on Twitter Spaces. We've had this problem when we tried Reddit's quite literal stolen copy of it called Reddit Talk, where we'll let speakers up and then they'll have trouble unmuting themselves. So it happens all the time. Don't ever feel, if you're ever in that position, don't feel embarrassed. It just happens. And I can now see it's connecting on your side. Um, Incidentally, what other national championship? Because we follow everything, including Japan and Canada. Canada's national championship was like 3 weeks ago. They finished pretty early over there, and it was won by Western Ontario. And then over in Japan, because it's if you're up really late, if Hawaii isn't late enough for you, you can stay up hours later and watch college football in Japan. And there's one team out there that just keeps kicking all kinds of butt. Kwansai Gakuin, the KG Fighters, and they won it again. They won 32 national championships since 1949, and it's not like there's 5 teams there. There's like 100 teams there. They just keep winning it. They're the Alabama of Japan. Now, some people ask what would happen if a Japanese team took on an American team. If it were an FBS or FCS team, they'd probably get their asses kicked. Excuse my language there. That said, we saw an example of it back in 2015. I guess there's some tie between those KG Fighters and Princeton. So FCS non-scholarship, but the Ivy Leagues are no slouches. I mean, Yale almost beat UConn, and granted it was UConn, but it's still not a weakness. It's not totally weak. They defeated Army several years ago, but Princeton went over there in a spring exhibition, and teams that do not offer scholarships in college football are allowed to play an international game if they so choose. So they went over there and played at the behest of the KG Fighters and just ran over them. And I watched a bit of that game, and you could tell it was the whole difference. Wasn't the skill players, the QBs, wide receivers, they were all fine. The problem was the line couldn't stop anybody because there was such a difference in size. Now, it's one thing to say, oh, Japanese people are smaller. No, no, no. If you're a big guy in Japan, there's a whole world called sumo wrestling. So I think what happens is all those big guys who would be natural linemen, just natural beasts, bowling through people or blocking people, well, they all go to sumo wrestling. So the Japanese linemen in college football tend to not be quite as large. All of that said, have you been able to unmute yourself? We'd love to hear. Oh, I can hear you.
Hey, yeah, sorry, my phone crashed there, man.
Don't worry about it.
Hey, long time no talk. I really don't have anything to say except for I wanted to thank you for everything you did for mine and Kevin's careers.
Oh, yes. Oh my goodness.
Um,
Right.
I
Yes, you
for
were a
y'all,
photographer for us like 3 or 4
yeah,
seasons
for all of
ago.
you who don't know, we randomly met on Reddit, and I shot the ODU Virginia Tech upset game in 2018, and ever since then, my career has taken off. Covered ODU for a few years, and now I have a job covering prep sports in Iola, Kansas, and it's a full-time job. And
That that is amazing, man. I
I told,
remember that too. You had done a
yeah,
bit of motorsports before that. You'd done a bit of motorsports. It came to me and you said like, "Hey, is it okay if I shoot a couple of games out here? I'm near Old Dominion, and yeah, and then by chance we got you in for their biggest game, their biggest win ever at the time,
yeah, still
because
is.
Virginia Tech went down to play because it's Newport News area, so there's a lot of Hampton Roads, a lot of
Hmm.
recruits. So Virginia Tech agreed to go out there. And then you were on the field when everyone stormed it in the middle of your photos. That's wild. I remember that. I could not believe the odds that we booked you in for that game.
Hey, I can't either, but ever since then it kind of just took off. Don't forget we did the Belt Bowl,
Yes, we did. The
South Carolina
Duke's Mayo
28.
Bowl now, but
Yeah, yeah,
those are they've always been good people there at Belk. I know
yeah.
I keep wanting to call them Belk as well, but Duke's Mayo. We're trying to be nice.
Well, it
The
was the Belt
Char-
Bowl.
Yeah, and then the Charlotte Sports Foundation is who puts that event on. But they're wonderful people. Man, that's great. Thank you for reaching out again. Oh my gosh, how's Kevin doing, by the way? Because Kevin
He's
covered some FAU games for us.
he actually helps run the FAU 247 site,
Oh, that's good for him.
and he's
Oh,
still
that's
doing high school
wonderful.
sports. I almost got him a job out here in Kansas last week, but he wanted to say he wanted to finish college first. But yeah, I moved out here about 2 months ago, full time job at a paper. Um, just published my first winter sports magazine. It's 24 pages of nothing but my writing. Yeah, I mean, if y'all are looking for a avenue into doing something, in journalism, and you have a spare weekend, I I don't know if life would be the same if I hadn't done that game.
Well, I again, I just wanted to say, Reese, thank you so much for covering that game for us, and I'm pleasantly surprised to hear from you tonight. That's great because that was one of the big games we covered early on because we've been doing media coverage since 2015 at our CFB. The joke is, I mean, historically, the joke is in journalism, sports journalism is the toy department. That is a saying that is far older than the internet. The toy
Would you
department,
believe? Would you
yeah.
believe I have a plaque of that on my desk?
Oh, that's great. Well, I mean, that's the thing. In Reddit, college football Reddit is actually the toy department leads the journalism of the entire website, which is kind of funny, but I think that's somewhat fitting for Reddit in a lot of
Yeah, it's
ways.
so wild what it turned into. Also, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
blocked in the group in the Reddit now. I posted one too many links to my articles,
Oh,
but I mean, ever since then, I won an FWA award recently.
yeah. Hey, by the way, Damp, while I got you here too, you just covered the Boca Raton Bowl for us last weekend. How did that? Tell us about that.
Sure. Well, this is my first time back in a legitimate press box since 2019 or no 2020 when I covered the national championship, and man, I missed it so much. There's nothing like being right on top of the game, um, watching it. It's incredible. Anyway, to the game. Um, Going into this, I didn't realize that Bailey Zappi was that close to smashing all sorts of FBS passing records. Um, I probably should have done my research in advance, but he came in to think 289 yards short of the passing yards record and was 5 touchdowns away from passing Joe Burrow's passing touchdowns record from 2019, and he obliterated both of those. He got through the passing yards in less than a half, and he went 2 past Burrow's record. So he ends the season with arguably one of the greatest seasons for a quarterback in FBS history. And I'll be honest, it kind of went under the radar, at least for me, and I'm sure for quite a few others as well. But I will say this. I know that, sorry, my earphones fell out. I know that press boxes are supposed to be neutral. There's no cheering, things like that. And they actually explicitly tell us that in advance every single time.
As they should.
But as they should. But you couldn't help but feel the electricity in that press box, seeing, oh, he's only 200 yards, 150, 150. And
were they announcing it that way? Were they kind of doing almost a countdown to how close? Or was there, like, sometimes there'll be a reporter who's doing that just because they've been following it the whole time, kind of blurting it out in the press box. But how were you all familiar with how close he was getting to this?
Well, I was very lucky, and I happened to be sat next to a spotter for ESPN. And I'll be honest, I learned a lot from him. First off, I didn't even realize that they had spotters in the television booths to help the anchors out, but he said that that's what he normally does. But in this case, he was doing it out in the press box. I guess distancing, I don't know. But it was cool getting to kind of learn from him, kind of learn the tricks of the trade. And he was keeping fastidious notes the whole time. So I was hearing it a lot from him, but there were a lot of others as well, just general journalists saying, okay, he's at this now. And then when he did hit those respective records, there's sort of for people who haven't been in the press box before, they have their own spotter, and they're able to keep a track of the numbers of players, who did what.
Right, they announce each play after they happen in kind of a neutral
exactly.
place.
And actually, the spotter has a spotter as well. The spotter then tells an announcer, and I didn't realize that until I got into a press box, which was really cool. So, like, for example, they'll say 12 passes to 18 for 6 yards or something like that. But when Zappe passed those two records, the person came over the PA and said, with that pass, Bailey Zappe has whatever, he's hit the passing records. But like I said, you could kind of feel the electricity kind of building a little bit. And that was in of itself really cool. These are all seasoned journalists, and they were getting hyped up for a big moment as well.
You know, one example of that, and I remember, just reading the articles, because I saw the game on TV, and it's probably the greatest game I ever saw on television, which was the famous Boise State, Oklahoma Fiesta Bowl. And some of the writers afterwards were just saying, one of my favorite articles, and I think it was Stuart Mandel, but don't quote me on that. I have to go back and check. He said, again, the press box, normally neutral, cheering is the worst thing you could do. But he said at the end of that game, everybody in the press box was losing it because it was just too good of a story. I think they weren't necessarily carrying that it happened to be Boise State so much as just watching how wild that play was to win on the Statue of Liberty after all the wild plays prior to it. He said everyone was just kind of lost in that moment, and I can only imagine that would have been a hard one to stay totally neutral on. I want to keep us moving on. I would love to hear from another caller. Let's see here. Username is All Dressed Father I Felipe. I've gone ahead and sent you an invite. I see you're connecting. We'd love to hear from you here on RCFB Talk 9. Can you hear me, or can you talk? We'd love to hear from you. Oh, it's always fun to learn as we go along. All right, well, while we solve that, and I know we keep running into some occasional technical difficulties there, right now, let's see. Sorry, go ahead. heading up into the future, just talking about what our CFB will be covering, we're going to be sending reporters this year to both of the semifinals, both the Cotton Bowl Classic and the Orange Bowl. So we'll be getting in there. Let's see here. Felipe, I see you're trying to unmute yourself. I know can kind of be a little annoying with how this works. We'll wait. Whenever you want, just go ahead and holler and we will let you in. And again, if you'd like to join us and speak, we'd love to hear from you. Well, let's see. While he's doing that, oh, wow, a bunch of you did. All right, let's go ahead and see Dr. Crash. Dr. Crash MD, I just went ahead and sent you an invite. We'd love to hear from you. Dr. Crash, we are paging Dr. Crash.
Hello?
Yep. I hear
Okay,
you.
Finally. How are you guys doing tonight?
How are you?
Good. Can't complain. I just wanted to say one little thing in here. I wanted to know everybody's opinion on how excited we are to see this Kansas Jayhawks football team within the next 5 years, right? Can we get some hype?
I am excited because when I saw who they hired, I thought it was a bold move because, I mean, let's face it, Kansas made one of the worst decisions in probably 20 years of college football when they hired Charlie Weiss.
Oh, yeah.
It was the only time I've ever seen, like, I think it was Athlon, preseason mag. The only time I ever saw them give an F to a hire before the season even began. I'm like, wow, that's damning,
Yep.
but I thought hiring Lance Leipold was amazing because I won't say I'm an enormous Division III football fan, but I was quite aware of what he was doing at Wisconsin Whitewater. And then Buffalo kind of took the risk in hiring directly from Division III a coach to come and take them over. And then obviously they started to see some improvement. And then, here we are. We're seeing the Jayhawks, show signs of life in multiple games this year, but then to go into Austin and pull another meme for the ages,
Best game of the season.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think there's a lot to be excited for in Lawrence. So I take it you yourself are a Jayhawk fan.
I am. I'm a Kansas grad, proud football fan. Sometimes I feel like I'm a bigger football fan than basketball just because our chances of winning are so low. So, I mean, it's just exciting every Saturday to see. I mean, obviously, usually we get killed, but I mean, I think that there's some real buzz around the program right now, and it's just pretty exciting to see finally after, over a decade,
Absolutely. I think everyone, anyone who's followed college football pretty deeply has got to be interested to see where things go from here. I think I'm curious to see who's their non-conference opponents opening up next season. I don't have that in front of me.
Yeah. I know we'll play Duke again, which we played them fairly close this year. It kind of got away from us in the second half, but we went into halftime leading. And then, there's probably an FCS team that we start with. And then, to be honest, I'm not sure where it goes from there. But I know that in the next few years, we renewed that rivalry with Missouri. So, I know that their program and, quite frankly, all their athletics, and of course, I'm a little biased as a Kansas fan, but all their athletics are kind of on the downhill. So I think that
that's going to be great to see that rivalry renewed because that's been one of the most passionate rivalries in college sports.
Especially in those 2007, 2008 seasons when we were both ranked in the top 5. Those games at Arrowhead were crazy.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and that was under Mangino, and it was an incredible time. His departure was unfortunate, and it alone shouldn't have set the program back, but I think the successive hires after that just did not quite work out.
I completely agree.
Hey, Damp, you said you had the non-conference handy?
Yes, I do. I just pulled it up. Kansas's non-conference for 2022, they're playing FCS Tennessee Tech at home. They're playing Houston away, so they're playing a future conference member, as a matter of fact. And then they're playing, like you mentioned, Crash mentioned, they're playing at home against Duke.
Those are all
So
really
that
winnable, I think. Those are all very plausible wins for them. I mean, Houston will probably be hard. Actually, I'll take that back. Houston could be a problem to
Yeah,
use that just fed into that joke easily. But
for sure.
well, I really appreciate you for joining us, Dr. Crash. Thanks so much. I'm gonna go ahead and just move on because I want to let some more folks in on this.
All
Hey,
right, appreciate it.
thank you. Hey, Kinsler's List, I'm letting you in because I know you just finished talking. You just finished covering the Potato Bowl for us, and I'd love to hear from you about that as you connect and hopefully unmute, which is in the bottom left of your iPhone screen or whatever device you're using. Can you hear us? Yet again, we can see someone unmuted and we can't hear from them. That's fine. When you get unmuted, just start talking and we will go from there. But he also, actually, you've had a full weekend. You also covered the semifinal in FCS football over in Bozeman. South Dakota State, the other SDSU, went and faced Montana State, which of course the Bobcats won, and they're headed down to the FCS title game to square off against the perennial opponent, North Dakota State. We're going to have someone covering that game as well. Should be another good one. In the same stadium that actually they're playing the Frisco Bowl right now, down there in Frisco, Texas. Thought for a second I heard you unmuted, but I'm not. It's so funny to be kind of trying to unmute people and then not quite being able to hear if they're unmuting themselves. When you get unmuted, Kinsler, just let us know. I'm going to go ahead and as it's going on, Alex Dilibertino, and I apologize if I butchered that. I mean, my name's Bobak Hayeri, so trust me, I'm used to it. If you can, unmute yourself, and we'd love to hear from you.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Sure
Hey,
can.
yeah, I just joined, so I don't really know what was said previously, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Clemson Tigers. Kind of any thoughts you had kind of about a down year this year, and maybe some takeaways from this past year and things to look ahead for next year, and kind of maybe some worrisome spots or some positive things to look forward to next year. And just love to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you for joining us. Yeah, Clemson. Oh my gosh. So, we knew inevitably they were going to be a down season after just, an unbelievable run there under Dabo. I mean, I was at the although they did lose the national championship that year, I was in the Superdome when they played LSU. And I mean,
yeah, I was there.
Yeah,
Yep.
and I mean, so you were?
Yep.
Oh, awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I was in the press box for that one. That was an exciting game to be at.
Everyone says it was a blowout, but it really wasn't that much. If you go back and watch it, yes, we got beat pretty handily in the fourth quarter, but it was a 3-point game going into the fourth quarter, and Nolan Turner drops a pick, a for sure pick. Go back and watch the game. Bad OPI call. I'm not saying we should have won or any other thing like that, but it was a lot closer than people are led on to believe in that game.
Yeah, and I remember how it while LSU seemed to kind of go in there as sort of a team of destiny, for lack of a better, and excuse that cliche, I do hate cliches like that, but it was, I agree with you. The game definitely didn't get out of hand until that fourth quarter, and then LSU started to really pull away. But I thought Clemson was doing enough, or at least was doing enough to make it a game up until that final bit, and then inevitably, it was like those games with Alabama. Sometimes you win them, and sometimes you don't. And obviously, again, you can't. I remember how tough it was for Clemson fans for the decade before Dabo got them where they are now. And inevitably, there's always going to be a slightly down year. And I know how much of a frustration it was for fans at Clemson, and losing a couple of, key coordinators doesn't help as well. That said, I mean, the question is, how much do you believe in Dabo Swinney? I think he's got the ability to turn it around again. I mean, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it goes next season. Obviously, we won't know until we see the product on the field. But it's still Clemson. It's still Dabo's, what he built there. And I know some people like to take some joy in seeing Clemson not do as well this year. I think that's inevitable whenever you've had that level of success. If you become and you kind of push yourself up to being what most people would consider a blue blood team, you're going to be on the receiving end of that. And that's got to be tough out there
Right.
for some of the Tigers fans. But I'm going to be honest with you, about 10 years ago, Clemson fans wouldn't have been calling themselves blue bloods in that sense. I mean, it would have been
I've
weird,
been a Clemson
because
fan for a long time, so I was there when Tommy Bowden was there, and Tommy West and all those guys. So I've seen it before. It was big.
yeah, exactly. So it's like, you know where that is. And I mean, you guys had some great signings. I mean, you guys had that, I think, was it the number one quarterback? I can't remember. You guys had a heck of
Yeah, we got Uyunglele number one. Trevor Lawrence was number one. Who are you talking about specifically?
That's got to be that. I mean, because that was one of the biggest problems this year heading for the Tigers, was the offense wasn't quite where it was. The defense was
you're
just
talking about
stellar.
this year? Yeah, we got a guy out of Texas, the number one.
Oh,
no,
I
guy.
meant like, yeah, and I just meant sort of like, oh, you're right, yeah, sort of just talking about the moving forward. I mean, Clemson's looks like that offense is going to come together. I mean, eventually, at least with the talent on the field, and I
hope
believe in
so.
Dabo.
I hope so.
I mean, I think Dabo could turn them around there. I mean, it would be shocking if he couldn't. I mean, I know to some extent losing a couple of key coordinators is gonna hurt. I was kind of shocked to watch the AD walk away, but I mean, that may or may not make a lot of difference. I doubt the new AD is gonna be like, no, I'm not gonna give Dabo what he needs to succeed if he asks for, the negotiation room to pull somebody in. But I think to an extent, maybe the Tigers are a product of their own success, but they've kept the CEO, and that should hopefully keep them in it. But that's a great question. I really what are your thoughts? I'm just going to ask you that since you brought it up. How I mean, are you optimistic about next season, or what are your biggest concerns?
Me, I mean, yeah, I'm optimistic. I think, like you said, I mean, if Dabo is there, we haven't really been in this position since, I'd say, like 2014, where he promoted, Tony Elliott to full-time coordinator and Jeff Scott to full-time coordinator, and we had some moving pieces there. So we've been kind of consistent since 2014. Basically, we've had Jeff Scott, Tony Elliott, and obviously Venables. So we haven't really been in this position for a long time. But like I said, I've been talking to some people, and like I said, as long as Dabo is there, I think we're in a good spot. We have a lot of good young talent. I don't think people on the outside, they don't really understand how Dabo runs his program. I'm not going to speak on behalf of him, obviously, but he kind of runs it in this way that it's almost like a minor league, like a minor league system in a way. So you can see these guys getting pulled up. The athletic director is going to be an in-house guy. Offensive coordinator Brandon Streeter is in-house guy. Defensive coordinator Wes Goodwin, nobody's ever heard of him, but he's probably one of the smartest defensive guys in college football. For everything you've heard that we're hearing about from the program, I mean, I think we have, like I said, a lot of good young talent. Watch Will Shipley, watch Andrew Makuba on the defense, Miles Murphy, Brian Brzee. We got a lot of good dudes. So I think as long as we got these dudes and we got, Cade Klubnik, kind of all-American quarterback coming in, I think we'll be all right. It just depends on how Dabo, how he handles this reshuffling of OC, DC, and AD.
Sounds good. I think that's going to be. We'll see whether, I guess, if Clemson will just reload. And I think that'll be the interesting thing to see. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate hearing your thoughts.
Thank you.
Hey, Kinsler, were you able to hop up? I thought I brought you up, and then I saw you kind of vanish there for a second. Then I also see Felipe trying to connect again. Felipe, if you're able to unmute, we'd love to hear from you too. Still can't quite hear you. All right, no problem. Well, while we're waiting for that to sort out, I'm going to go ahead and let someone else up. Kyle Perry, Swather15. Kyle Perry, feel free to unmute yourself. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the college football
Hello, can you hear me?
bowls, whatever. Sure can.
So similar to what Dr. Crash was talking about, not to talk down to the Jayhawk fans, but I feel bad as a Husker fan now talking in the same realm as the Jayhawk is. And, we got a lot of new coaches, and we're obviously on the up and up from last year, seeing a lot of improvements, getting Mickey Joseph, got Whipple calling some of the plays now. I got to think that we're going to make some big improvements on offense. I'd like to see what you guys think about where we think we can go from here. Obviously, it's very unnerving being able to score a touchdown and then wonder if you're actually going to get the extra point or not. So, I'd like to know where you think we can go from here and what you think the future of the Huskers is looking like.
The Huskers have definitely had kind of this I don't want to say curse, but it's been, I mean, it's hard not to call this season a curse. You don't have that many close games and not wonder what sort of unlucky thing did
The
somebody
Frank
do in that
Solich
program.
curse.
Yeah, is that what it was?
I'm a young enough guy that I didn't get to enjoy the '90s and all the hype that was built up, or that a lot of these guys are still living upon. It seems like, but I remember the early 2000s, and I remember watching Eric Crouch and watching the early. We went to the national title game in 2001. I think we lost against Miami at that time, but
that was the unstoppable Miami
and
team. Yeah, you guys went up against. Yeah,
and that was kind of the last big one. I remember a couple of Rose Bowl appearances early on, but then all of a sudden it just kind of dissipated after we got rid of an unfortunate 9-win season. Oh ho hum, we come again to have that with Bo Pelini, and it's still not good enough. And it's just been this circle of death that we can't get ourselves out of. We keep shooting ourselves in the foot, and it seems like, okay, we had this Big Ten kicker last year in Culp, and all of a sudden he couldn't pull the trigger and make things happen again this year. And it's like, well, okay, we got 6 points. What about the 7th? It sucks. It's so unbelievable to see this kind of unraveling in the team in the 4th year now. And I like to think that we're gonna hold on strong to a coach like Scott Frost and not just give up after 4 years like a lot of places do. But hopefully him and Trev Alberts can figure out a good relationship and get the right people on board to make this thing happen.
I do agree with you that I remember when they fired Solich, and a lot of people were a little surprised. But of course, it was, as you said, Nebraska coming out of that incredible run in the 90s. It was shocking for them to not necessarily be as strong as they were in getting those 10 or 11 win seasons. So that's why a 9-win season at that time seemed like a fireable offense. And obviously he went on to Ohio. I should say, there was a moment after Nebraska fired Solich where Minnesota made what I thought one of the worst mistakes they ever did. Frank Solich wanted to become the next head coach of Minnesota after they'd fired Glenn Mason. And then they ended up hiring Tim Brewster, which was a disaster. Brewster is a good coordinator, but was a disastrous head coach. And that was, I thought, one of those great mistakes, because at the time the Gophers were a heavily running team with guys like Lawrence Mulrooney, and instead they shifted their offense completely over under Brewster, and they kind of floundered around for a decade. But going back to Nebraska, Nebraska, I think college football, and maybe this is my age speaking here, I think college football is a better place when Nebraska is a strong team. They're blue blood. They have so many interesting traditions. I've also been to Lincoln to see a game, and if anyone hasn't, I recommend it. It is one of those college football cathedrals out there. The fans are lovely. Lincoln's a fun place to be around that stadium. But when you lose so many games that close as the Huskers did this year, you just wonder if it just needs a couple of tweaks just to get over that hump heading into next season. I'm glad they're letting Scott Frost coach another season. I think now, if next season doesn't go great, I would not be shocked or necessarily blame Trev Alberts for looking in another direction. But I definitely agree that it does seem like Nebraska's still dealing with that curse of firing Solich, but I think there's some optimism to be had, and hopefully they'll be able to turn around next season. It'll be interesting to see a Nebraska team that is strong again, because people forget how dominant and how terrifying it was to realize your team was going to be up against Nebraska for many, many years there.
And I like to think that they have as much of an opportunity to bring these, blue blood athletes in. And, 5-star recruits can certainly come to Nebraska as easily as they can go to USC or go to Oklahoma or any of those other big name programs. And we can certainly bring the talent in. It's not a case of talent, I don't think. But now with this transfer portal, obviously we're seeing our recruiting class at, now outside of the top 25 for the first time in a long time. But I think we're also looking at the opportunity to bring these kids in from the transfer portal that hadn't really been there for the past few years. And all of a sudden we're kind of changing the way that we have to think about things. I think everybody's bringing that kind of mindset to the table too. And it's just going to change across, all these other programs that have been struggling for the past few years. And you look at a team like Cincinnati that can rise to the top and all of a sudden get into the playoff. I think it really speaks volumes to what's going to happen next, both for Nebraska, but then also hopefully for the rest of the college football landscape.
Well, good luck. We hope the Huskers can turn it around for your sake, for their fans' sake, and in my personal opinion, Bob Ekayeri, not of Reddit CFB itself. I think it would be nice to see the Huskers become a force again, because I think college football is better with frankly more variety in which old blue bloods are still kicking. All right. Well, thanks again for joining us. Hey, Kinsler, I know you let me know that you think it was your car that was giving you trouble. Can you hear us now, or can you speak now? Yes, you
I can
can.
hear you guys. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So, excuse any background noise. I'm on the road back from Boise. I just finished covering the famous Idaho Potato Bowl, so all those fun photos you saw on the Twitter feed were from us, from me at least. It was a blast. This is my second game in 4 days. I was in Bozeman on Saturday. Yeah, Saturday for the FCS semifinal between Montana State and South Dakota State. It's been such a whirlwind the past couple of days, and it's been an absolute treat to do this.
Yeah, and I'd love to first start with that FCS title game. What was that atmosphere like in Bozeman?
It was raucous. It was packed to the teeth. I think the record for crowd is like just over 21,000, and we were at 20,500 fans in the crowd. It was incredible. The Montana State people were amazing. They hooked me up with the field pass and everything, and I was able to kind of get a good idea of like what that crowd was like. And they are passionate fans up there, because I mean they don't even have an FBS school in the state or within 500 miles really. So they love their Bobcats. One of the more funny stories was the student information director for Montana State. I was sitting next to a guy from Missoula. He does the Fox coverage for Missoula, and he was mentioning the Grizzlies, and the guy and the student and the information director came up and said, "We're not talking about the Grizzlies at all. You're gonna piss me off." And it was he was dead serious, and it was really interesting to see just like how serious they are about their hating their rival. And
Oh, they absolutely are. I mean, we had somebody over at the Brawl of the Wild a few weeks ago, which is that awesome name they have for the Montana State rivalry. It was in Missoula this year, and that is one of the great rivalry games most people don't know about, because both teams are in the FCS, not in the FBS.
Yeah. So, but they were loud the entire time. They were chanting the Jack Suck the entire time, and it was just really fun to see. And Montana State was able to kind of get the win. And honestly, I wrote about it in my reporting, but their quarterback now, Tommy Millett, he's from Butte, and he's the backup. He's a true freshman. Hadn't started a game until their first FCS playoff game against UT Martin a couple weeks back, because their starter, Matthew McKay, he announced he was going to transfer to an FBS school the day, like a couple days before the playoff game. So he's been a treat to watch. I mean, he's been running wild over literally everybody. And I honestly
So
think,
heading
I
back to
know
the
it's early.
Potato Bowl.
Yeah.
So
Continue.
going back to the Potato Bowl, what was the atmosphere like there? I mean,
I
because
mean, it
it's everyone's heard of the Potato Bowl. They know it's had many different names over the years. I remember when it was the Micron PC Bowl, the Humanitarian Bowl, but it's always been up there in Boise on the blue turf for the longest time before colored turf became more popular and people weren't necessarily following what was then the WAC. That used to be the only time people would ever get a glimpse that there was a stadium out there with a blue field. So, what was the atmosphere like there? I mean, was it fun? I mean, how good did Wyoming and Kent State show up for it?
I mean, Wyoming showed up pretty well. I mean, the school and the state itself aren't too big. It's like an enrollment of less than 20,000, and the state's pretty not too populous to begin with. But they out of like 10,000 fans there, which is not a lot for Albertson Stadium. I would say a good 7 to 8,000 at least uh, were Wyoming fans. So like they packed their section, the lower bowl at least, pretty well, and were pretty raucous. Kent State was pretty subdued. I mean, just given the size, just given the travel requirements, and they're pretty. I mean, they were pretty disappointed after the MAC championship too, with losing that. But they were pretty good too. And then there was a sizable contingent of just Boise fans who were just chanting "Wyoming sucks" the entire time, which was honestly pretty funny to see. Like there's some solid hate there.
That is amazing. I never even thought about that. Yeah, you got conference rivals in the home stadium,
Yeah,
and why not just let loose? Oh goodness.
yeah. So it was a great environment. I mean, the press box was full, and on the field when I got down there the second half, it was a blast. I was chilling on the Wyoming sideline for the most part, just because there was a lot more going on. Both mascots and both cheer teams were both on the Wyoming sideline, so it was just a lot more fun to interact with people on that side. But it was a good atmosphere there. I'm not gonna lie, it was a lot of fun.
So you took that video on the field of the players celebrating with Spuddy Buddy.
Yes.
That was that was an incredible video. I should find that and drop that in. But that is I was like, oh my gosh, is he on the field and is that Spuddy Buddy surrounded by a bunch of Wyoming players and everyone's just dancing? I mean,
Yeah.
you know, you can say what you want. Is there too many bowls? I don't think there are because you get moments like that. When do you get to see a bunch of college football players dancing with literally a giant potato?
There are definitely not too many bowls. All the Wyoming players were ecstatic to be there. They had a rough season up and down. They lost their starting quarterback midway through the season, like they did last year. And Levi Williams was a treat to watch. He was running wild. And I wanted to bring up the parallels between both the Wyoming offense and the Montana State because a lot of people may not know Brett Vegan, the coach at Montana State, was Craig Bull's offensive coordinator last year. So they ran a very similar offense, and it was a lot of QB runs, a lot of QB zone reads and QB options, and they were. It was incredible to see just how fun he was to play and again there are a lot of similarities between the two offenses and a lot of parallels in the season. And they also opened the season against each other with two different quarterbacks, and Montana State almost beat them. It was 1916 in Laramie.
That was great. Thank you so much for sharing all that information, Kinsler. I'm glad we could have someone there, and I'm glad we had someone experience that in the Potato Bowl, which
Yeah,
has been around for quite some time. Thanks again, man, and drive
yeah,
safe
of course.
as you head
Thanks.
back.
Appreciate it.
All right, yeah, take care.
Take care. Bye.
All right, we want to let some more people talk, so let's see here. Christian Cat, I've gone ahead and sent you an invite. When you get a chance, unmute yourself. We'd love to hear from you. From what I can tell, sometimes people's cars or Bluetooth speakers sometimes interfere, but feel free to just go ahead and start talking.
Yeah, so I'm a
We can hear you.
transplant. I went to school at Penn State, graduated a couple of years ago. I now live in Big 12 country in Enid, Oklahoma, right? So about an hour away from Oklahoma State, about an hour and 45 from Norman. So I'm kind of an omniscient viewer on these Pokes fans, on these Sooners fans, and how they view the Big 12. And I've just kind of wrapped my head around the new Big 12, right? The new four teams. they've got to be praying for an expanded playoff, right? They've got to be praying for an expanded playoff because you can't show me a school in the Big 12 right now that can be a consistent playoff contender in the 14 format like the Sooners were. That's what I'm thinking right now.
Yeah, I think they. Well, I mean, I definitely agree with your position on that. I mean, I think the Big 12 has got to be one of the conferences that wants that expanded playoff. I think most of the conferences do, except for possibly the SEC, from what it sounds like. The I I personally, and I know this is something that I could speak for basically the entire team that runs Reddit CFB. We'd love to see an expanded playoff. We think it would be exciting for everyone. Now, how big it is, and you'll see some differences. I'm fine with the more the merrier personally. I'd be okay with 12. I'd be okay with 16. Eight's fine as well. I think it would be great to have 8 teams in there. I think 12 or more would be a little bit better. I think it would be more exciting to see some at-large programs, more opportunities for a couple of good, or even at least one good G5 program to get in there. I think that would make it more exciting for fans. You know, one thing that, and I know Kinsler mentioned this, at least when he was kind of chatting with us behind the scenes after he covered that FCS home game, pardon me, for the semifinal home game for the Montana State Bobcats. He said being at that game was proof enough of how exciting some first round games on home campuses could be and how raucous it could be and just how what the environment would be like in a college football playoff that was expanded by at least a little bit. Um, and I can't imagine it wouldn't be anything other than exciting. I think for college football fans who just love the sport, they're just into watching the sport, seeing football, seeing these teams fight each other, battle it out, get to see who the best is. I think it's hard not to want some level of expansion in the playoff. And again, I think there's room for discussion. It's kind of sad how long it seems to take the powers that be to sort it out. And I know there's a lot of factors in there. There's a lot of money at stake, and a little bit of question on whether or not the Power Five, who are of course those that have the most control in all of it anyway, whether they'll get those guaranteed spots in the playoff. But at the same time, I think most people would love to see it expanded. Other than perhaps the SEC, I could understand why the system right now is quite beneficial for them. Certainly towards the end, the BCS was great for them. And I'm not going to cast any shade on them for feeling that way. But by the way, what else, any other different, were you originally from Big Ten country before you moved to Big 12 country, or did you just happen to be at Penn State and then move out west, or?
So I grew up in about an hour and a half northwest of New York City, New York. So pretty much no college affiliation. I guess if you had a college that you kind of held true, it was Syracuse hoops or Rutgers football, but nothing really. I had a self-made love for Penn State football, paid the outrageous tuition and loans to actually go to Penn State, and then further fell in love and Penn Stater for life. And I'm a part of that cult right now. But watching the Penn State Michigan 2013 game with McGloin to Allen Robinson, that game when it went to 4 overtimes, that's what kind of personally got me committed to the school. But uh, yeah, it's a wild ride seeing the different kinds of college towns in comparison to State College, because I got State College was my first college town. It was my only college town for 4 years, unless I took road trips to other Big Ten country schools, like I did for a wrestling meet. I went to Columbus for an Ohio State Penn State dual meet, and I didn't even go to anywhere in Indiana except for Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game that year. But going to Stillwater and seeing Norman, I mean, no one goes to the bars in Stillwater on game day. It is the weirdest thing in the world. We went to the most popular bar on the strip down there in Stillwater on a Saturday night game day. It was in early November when they played TCU and kicked the crap out of them on a primetime game. It was me and my girlfriend and 2 other people in the most popular bar on the strip in Stillwater. They just don't exercise that as an option. It's tailgate during the day and the bars at night, and that's it. Because I know there's enough people in town to stay college to do both, where the bars are crowded and the tailgates are crowded, but it just wasn't an option in Stillwater. I was shocked.
That is really fascinating. I mean, that makes a lot of sense with how the cultures might shift. But I mean, and it's interesting the way you say that too, because to me, Columbus is a bit bigger of a city rather than being necessarily a college town. Although obviously Ohio State's got its little universe around it. I personally went to two major cities for college. I went to the University of Southern California in Los Angeles, and then I went to did a graduate degree at the University of Minnesota, so also in another major metropolitan area. But the college town experience is something else. I mean, a long time ago, in what feels like a universe decades ago, I dated someone at UC Davis, so that's like the one college town in the state of California. And the only reason it is because Davis owns all the farms between it and Sacramento, so it keeps itself separate. But there's something to be said about the college town experience, especially on a major game day. And as someone who has had an opportunity to travel the road, I know exactly what you mean. It's neat to see how other schools and other programs, kind of the culture before a game, can be like. But thank you for joining us and giving us that perspective. We really appreciate it. All
Yeah,
right,
no
so I
problem.
want to go ahead and invite at least a couple more people. Ben, Ben, I know I've seen you waiting here for a while. It's been a while, man. What's up? Let you unmute yourself, and we'll hear from you, Ben. Or have you been on? Sometimes I swear people end up on hold so long that the system crashes.
Oh no, it
Can you hear
hadn't
us?
crashed. It's just that my phone, was a little bit in sleep mode, so there's been that. I am trying to think of what to talk. Oh yeah. So the first week of bowl games has happened, and I may or may not. We may or may. We've talked about some of these, but the way the ending to the NIU Coastal game went was
It was a disaster.
the disaster.
It was absolute.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. I thought they. So everything that I saw from that was like, so does anybody know what's going on here? And the answer was clearly no. And so they just let it kind of happen. Because you get the play to the sideline, they rule it a catch, I think. Apparently it might have been incomplete. So, but they say it's a catch. So, okay. But apparently the dude's in bounds. Now, there's 2 seconds left. If I recall correctly, you can't get a playoff with 2 seconds left if the clock is going to go running. I think the rule is you have to have 3, right? I remember this being a rule somewhere where it's like you need to have.
I believe so.
Yeah, because I think this was the Michigan State thing, and then eventually they decided to change the timing rules, where it's like you need X amount of time. And then especially after the Alabama-Auburn fiasco at the end of the first half in 2019, when Auburn somehow got off a last-second field goal with 1 second left on a running clock, which makes literally no sense from a logical standpoint. I thought they'd fix that. But instead what happens is they try and make it seem like you can run a play, and then they run the clock anyway, and it's just like, really? What's going on here? Are we?
Yeah, it was an unfortunate way to end what was otherwise a highly entertaining game. And I think, two good teams, at least with compelling stories. Coastal has had one heck of a season. I think the fact that Jamie Chadwell is staying there is wonderful. I think it's going to be, and their QB's coming back next season. That was just announced today. I think that's a really exciting situation for them. But NIU, I mean, not only did they win the MAC, and we joked about it obviously earlier in the show that Wyoming beat them and now beat Kent State, so they're kind of by default the champions of the MAC if you want to look at it that way. But anyway, NIU, they turned it around. I mean, Hammock, that head coach of theirs, he made the finalist list for coach for the Eddie Robinson Coach of the Year award based on the fact that he turned around the Huskies so well. And seeing those two go into those final seconds and then just have it end on kind of what felt like a botched decision by the referees was just a complete and utter anticlimactic disappointment. And you hate to see that. You really do. Ben, I want to keep moving on, but what other game struck you this weekend?
It was really those it was the first two. I'm trying to remember what else. I didn't get a chance to watch it, but seeing the result of the Celebration Bowl, I mean, you're talking about a team that has 10 wins going up against a team with 11 wins against a 6-5 team that was like, we don't know what they are. And then once again, it turns out the MEAC, the announcement of the MEAC's death was a tad exaggerated, to use a turn of phrase.
Well, I'll say this much. I think that was a fascinating game to see develop, only to watch how people were reacting to it. Because if you want to see a massive amount of Schadenfreude, it was getting embarrassing to almost watch the Florida State fans. They were loving every second of it because they have Deion Sanders has not made himself appreciate. Deion's an interesting guy, and I appreciate what he's doing. You want to get your team on the map. You want people to notice what's going on. It's one thing to be a famous person, a famous athlete becoming a head coach, but once you get to that program, he did everything in his power to make people notice Jackson State. And I think that's great. That's what you want to do. But conversely, when you do all of that, there are going to be people who are really happy to see you fail. And we saw that. And I mean, he denies it about this whole relationship with Barstool and picking off FACU's number one recruit. But it'll be interesting to see as that story develops if there's anything more to it, because I guarantee you there's people probably all over, not just the Knowles Twitter, but I think other sports reporters, that story is so juicy that people are going to be looking into that thing, I think, for the entire offseason. The only
Oh, yeah.
thing with Deion at Jackson State that's got me a little uncomfortable is the fact that during the season, and there's no way this was just being spontaneous. People who follow the sport close enough, you know that everyone's got an agent, and their agents are planning stories or planning ideas. There was a while there where I swear, anytime anyone got fired, Deion Sanders kept coming up as the coach's name. I remember during a game, Gus Johnson just starts saying, "Oh, I hear Deion Sanders is going to be USC's next head coach."
I remember
And
that.
it was like, whoa, who told you that? That's the first time I think even the beat writers have heard that one before. So I kind of wonder if if he decides to bail on them, it's not going to be great considering how much of a sale he's made on going to a place like Jackson State, bringing back the relevancy of the HBCU. And I'm going to actually step that one back. HBCUs, if you haven't seen a game at one of them, you got to. It's a totally different environment. It's exciting. It's a whole different experience in a good way. Football is solid, but it's the bands, it's the tailgates, it's the pure experience there. So I think it's wonderful he drew more attention to it. We'll see how that pans out in the long run. But I mean, I think it's wonderful what he's doing to bring attention there. I don't know. He has to stay there, I think, for a while there, though, for it to be sustainable. And I hope he does. I mean, he's certainly well off enough that he could decide to do this and just stick it out and do more to make Jackson State a bigger program. I mean, the last time I noticed Jackson State, it's because I was wondering whatever happened to Timmy Chang, the Hawaii QB who set some records back in the day, and he at the time was their quarterbacks coach. Now he's at Nevada. But that was the last time I had paid attention to Jackson State, was by accident. I just kind of found out that's where he went.
Yeah, I think the whole thing with Deion Sanders at Jackson State and this whole thing is basically, can this be sustained, and is this something that will hopefully not end up hurting people, because the difference between Jackson State and Florida State is very drastic in many regards, especially in terms of the facilities, in terms of the resources.
I
Because
agree with what you're saying there, because player development, I think, is the one area where you see just a tremendous difference, especially at the upper echelon of the FBS programs. And I think that is going to be a viable concern to see how that goes, especially when some of these high talents. I mean, you're going to college football because your goal is the pros. And you hope that they can get the most out of that to develop, because obviously when you're right out of high school, you're not going to be going in the pros for the most part. I'm sure there's some there might be some physical freak out there that has somehow surpassed that. But I mean, generally speaking, those player development programs are what are going to make you, the best player you can be. And it's something you can't undercut. Ben, thanks so much. I want to go ahead and keep moving on here because we've got some others, and I want to just make sure we let some other folks get a chance to talk here on Reddit Talk, RCFB Talk 9. Brandon, I just sent you, pardon me, Braden Gerbig. I just sent you an invite. Unmute yourself whenever you get a chance. We'd love to hear from you. Siri unmuted. Now, the question is, can the speaker pick it up, or is it being diverted somewhere else? We keep running into these problems. I'm sure Twitter's working on it. I'll tell you one thing, though. When we were doing these via Reddit's native app, it was just as bad. So there's something to be said about why don't they let us do these on desktop. I don't know. Well, while that kind of, it looks like he's having some technical difficulties. So Miller Clark, I'm going to go ahead and send you an invite as well. Feel free to just holler. We'd love to hear from you.
Hey, first of all, I just wanted to say fire Mike Norvell. Had to get that in there. 2 questions. Do you think Big Game Bob maintains his reputation in coaching big games in his return? And 2, what are your thoughts on the Tank Bigsby situation?
Good questions. Okay, so I have to say, I think Bob Stoops coming back for this game, obviously given the situation, which was the drama of that, I mean, somehow has gotten forgotten because so much has happened since. I mean, I think he's in the perfect situation because I think it's almost like if he wins a game, oh, he's back. Oh, look at him. He did that great thing. And he'll probably just, pleasantly walk back into retirement. And if he loses, it's like, well, it wasn't really his team entirely. He kind of stepped in. He did the noble thing. He took, he's a believer through and through. But I don't know. How do you feel about that? I love when people ask questions like that because I'd love to hear your thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like he can do no wrong. I think Sooners are going to love him either way. I respect him for turning down getting paid for it, but they're giving him money for it anyhow. I'm just excited to watch them play Oregon. It should be a fun game.
Absolutely. In the Alamo Bowl, which is going to be fun in the Alamo Dome. I mean, that's a great place, great venue. We've sent people there to cover that game a couple of times in a row. We're going to have people there on actually a photog and a guy in the booth for that. Hey, Damp, I know you had some thoughts on this too. You wanted to chime in. I bet he's having mic problems as well. Oh, that's just how it is. But what was the second half of your question? I apologize, Miller.
Yeah, so unrelated to Oklahoma, just wanted to get your thoughts on the Tank Bigsby situation with how they're saying he was going to transfer and then he ended up deciding to stay at Auburn.
I always see, whenever I see a player do that, I wonder if they start testing the waters and then they just start to get, they don't see the opportunities that they thought were right. It's always, gosh, Deb, I know you actually did want to talk on that one. You still having technical? Okay, he's probably still having technical difficulties. I always find it intriguing to see when players start to do that and then come back. Where did you think he was going to end up, Miller? I mean, where were you find on that?
I grew up an Auburn fan, so I'm happy he stayed at Auburn. I was worried he was going to transfer watching that South Carolina game. Mike Bobo is just terrible. I was disappointed when they hired him, and then just continually disappointed throughout the season. But I was interested to see if he was going to go somewhere, where he would go, and how he would be used, because he'd pretty much be a starting running back anywhere, maybe outside of like Texas.
Absolutely. And Mike Bobo, that was a star that completely crashed. I remember when he was a rising star and Colorado State hired him as their head coach, seemed like a great fit. He had that kind of aw shucks way of speaking. I had a chance to interview him a couple of times over at the Mountain West Media Days. And then yeah, he just stunk it up out there, and then eventually, although they seem to outdo that when they hired Adazio, whose last, I still love his final game at Colorado State was he was ejected from it as a head coach, but but yeah, and then he completely bombed out there, and I do wonder if he somehow impressed Harsin because they coached against each other for a couple of years there. But apparently, yeah, it didn't work out, and clearly maybe getting him out of there was enough to convince him to stay. Hey, Damp, I know you were having some technical difficulties. Can you unmute yourself now?
Finally, yes. Well, my comment was actually going to be on the previous topic since we moved past it, I'll let you guys get back to the Big Speed conversation.
Oh, no, go ahead. You can hit the last one. I do want to keep us moving though, through some more callers because we're running a little bit low on time this week. We're because of the holiday travel season, some of us are actually I'm actually getting ready to hop into the airport right now. But you know what? First of all, I just want to say thanks again, Miller. I apologize. I'm going to just keep moving us along right now, and thanks for that. Thanks for that. Thanks for that feedback and the part of those questions, Evan, I've gone ahead and sent you an invite. Please go ahead and join us. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so my question was actually building off Miller's a little bit. Is it really going to change recruiting all that much? It seems like I'm an Iowa State fan. A lot of Iowa State defensive players entered the transfer portal. On the whole, do you think that players entering the transfer portal and bigger programs going after players transferring will affect high school recruiting?
That's a really good question. Where do you fall on that? I mean, what are your thoughts? Because I mean, it's interesting that you brought that in.
I think that it will kind of, from my perspective, cause bigger programs to go after top G5 guys or players that are already developed to kind of plug holes. And I think that might really open some opportunities for some lower P5 programs or savvy G5 programs to go after high school recruits that normally wouldn't be available to them, but because those holes are already filled by the top P5 programs through transfer guys, that G5 programs, if they get some recruits that are willing to stay, I think that'll be a really interesting going forward.
I think you did a great job of hitting that topic. I think the longer the transfer portal exists, the more we see how programs, again, as you said, plug holes, use it to fill spaces, and gives, frankly, players a little bit more of an open market, which wasn't allowed for them. And I thought in a way that didn't necessarily benefit them. It was benefiting the coaches, not the players, who supposedly are, why we have college sports in my mind. It should be for them. The coaches are great. Don't get me wrong. You can have a bunch of great players and still be complete crap on the field. That's what we call USC football. And I say that as a Trojan fan. All right, everyone. But I think you hit your nail on the head there. I think it's going to be interesting to see how the longer it exists, the more people adjust to it, and kind of the strategy that gets involved in terms of where young players decide to go. Thanks so much for that impact, that feedback. Hey, Braden, I noticed you seem to have gotten yourself technically able to join us again. I wanted to give you a chance because we're going to have to slowly start wrapping things up here. But I'd love to, Braden, I know you were anxious to get back up here. Unmute yourself. We'd love to hear from you.
Hey, can you hear me?
Sure can.
Hey, Michigan will beat Georgia December 31st because Georgia right now, at the end of the season, not at the beginning of the season, not in the middle of the season, Georgia at the end of the season is having a quarterback controversy. This is one of the things I've never seen before in college football, that at the end of the year, a team competing for a national championship is in the middle of a quarterback controversy. Also, I don't think anybody can stop Michigan's run game. We got two of the best running backs in the country. Our offensive line just won the award for the best offensive line in the country. And our defense is mid-tier. And I don't think Stetson Bennett can get it done against us. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's going to be interesting to see how you guys do against each other. It's going to be a good matchup. I'm looking forward to seeing it. Certainly, Alabama proved that Georgia is mortal after all. And we'll just have to see how that turns out. I appreciate your thoughts on that, and it was great to hear from you. Thank you. Hey, Judd, I just saw you joined us.
Yeah, I had to hop in here. What's going on, guys? I appreciate you.
What's up?
So yeah, I heard what Braden said, and I, I, I gotta say the quarterback controversy at the end of the year. I mean, that it's not necessarily true. I mean, you got to look at Alabama in 2017, 18. You had Tua, Jalen. There's some quarterback controversy there. I don't necessarily think that really plays a big role necessarily. I think it's going to be really going to come down to if Michigan can score on Georgia's defense. I don't know if it's really going to come down to Georgia scoring on Michigan because I think they have the playmakers to do it. But I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about Jahmyr Gibbs and his. I don't know if you guys already talked about this or not. I kind of jumped in here late. Did you guys already talk about that?
No, we haven't. Go for it. Go for it. We'd love to hear
For
your
sure.
thoughts.
So I actually grew up a Georgia Tech fan. I went to Alabama. So kind of got the best of both worlds with that decision today that Gibbs with him committing to Bama. But I really think that, in not being a homer on it, I really do think that he has potential to be a Heisman breakout player next year. And I don't want to talk about 2022 before this season's even over. But that's a talent that's unleashed at Georgia Tech that nobody has seen since Calvin Johnson, Demaryius Thomas were there. And the fact that they lost them in the transfer portal was a shame. It's a shame that they couldn't get their crap together and they couldn't get their shit together enough to get that offensive line, get holes for him. But I think he's going to thrive and do great things at Bama. So I kind of just wanted to, hear what your guys' thoughts are on that.
Well, actually, and this is my great apology. We're going to actually have to wrap this Reddit talk right up right now. We've actually run out of time. As I mentioned really at the early outset, I'm actually heading into the airport for a flight. And next week, we promise to have a lot longer time to talk to all of you out there as we discuss college football and go one more week into bowl season. So please, on behalf of myself and everyone on the Reddit RCFB team, thank you for joining us tonight. We'll be around again next Tuesday night. We hope you have happy holidays wherever you are, wherever you're going, and whatever you're up to. And again, enjoy the college football season. Thank you for joining us.